My name is Connie Stevens. I'm Beacon Pointe's Chief Practice Officer, and I'm thrilled to welcome you today to our special event covering a very important topic, particularly to women as caregivers, how we protect our elders from financial fraud. Unfortunately, is something that I think we all know is rampant, and so we'll have some great tips for us all to be able to take home and better protect those that matter to us so much. So for those of you that are new to Beacon Pointe or our Women's Advisory Initiative, our Women's Advisory Initiative, also known as WAY, is something that we created a little over a dozen years ago in order to bring more women to the financial table. And over the years, we've held lunches, dinners, special events, webinars, and written a book, had podcasts, and our goal really is just to, again, engage with our women clients and make sure that we're discussing topics that are important to you. We're proud to be the largest women-run RIA in the country and really excited to share today's topic with you. So before we get into that, I just want to go ahead and introduce Jacqui Friedrich. She is our mediator for the day, and she will be introducing our very guest speaker that she's worked with for quite some time, Whitaker Goldstein. And with that, I'll go ahead and pass on the mic to you, Jacqui. Thanks so much.
All right. Thank you, Kami. It's my pleasure to introduce a close friend of our Beacon Pointe Asheville office. We've worked together for quite a long time, as Kami said. Heather Goldstein. She is a principal at the Winkle Law Firm based here in Asheville, North Carolina. Heather focuses her practices on client advocacy, dispute resolution, and litigation in a wide variety of situations where an elderly person is vulnerable to exploitation. She also works with clients to proactively develop aging plans and counsels clients who serve in a fiduciary capacity for an older client. Heather participates on Buncombe County's Elder Justice Leadership Team and serves on the board of the NC chapter of National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. I've seen this presentation several times, and I know you're going to enjoy it and get a lot of good information from Heather. Heather will be presenting for about 40 minutes, and then we'll have a Q&A. If you have questions, use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. I will be getting and monitoring those questions, and then we'll bring them up either during the presentation or at the end of the presentation. So with that, I'm going to let Heather take over.
Thank you very much, Jacqui and Kami. I am very pleased to be with you all today to talk to you about a topic that I will say I spend probably the majority of my waking hours thinking about. The time in my waking hours that I'm not thinking about this topic, I'm usually driving my 4 children around the Southeast for various soccer games. But I will confess that lots of times I think about this topic while I'm in the car driving them to soccer games. I view in my experience that the financial exploitation of older adults in this country is at an epidemic. I wanted to give you just a couple quick numbers that I pulled down this morning. The AARP does reports trying to quantify the financial impact of financial exploitation of older people. And their report from June this year, 2023, estimates that $28.3 billion are taken from older adults in this country every year. And of that $20 billion, that's 71% of the total amount, is taken by people that you know. So while you might have seen a lot on the news about frauds and scams, people calling you, trying to get you to wire money to India, that certainly happens. And there's a lot of good PR around it to help people protect themselves. But what I'm going to mostly talk about today is the kind of fraud and exploitation that happens from people who are in your community, in your sphere. It may be caregivers, it may be family. Of the total cases, according to the AARP, total cases, 12.5% of all reported exploitation cases are from people that you know. So just take a minute and think that if 12% of all the cases are taking 70% of all the dollars, what that is telling you is that when exploitation is happening from someone you know, it's happening at a much greater scale, and a lot more money is being taken this way than in the fraud and scam way. And that may surprise you to know that. So what I want us to do is roll up our sleeves, put on our gloves, and spend the next 40 minutes together thinking about how we are going to fight the battle to protect ourselves and the people in our community that we love from this happening to us. I'm going to spend about half the time with you talking about what is exploitation, how does it happen, what does it look like, and the second half will be what you can do to prevent yourself and what you can do if you believe it's happening to you or someone that you know or care about. With that, let's just answer the basic question. What is financial abuse? I also say financial exploitation. I mean those interchangeably. This is a definition. There are many out there. If you Google it, you'll find some, but this is a definition that to me encompasses all the situations we're going to talk about. First, it begins with acquiring an older person's property. And I hate to break it to you, but according to most legal definitions, you are older if you are over the age of 60. I realize this may come as a shock to some of you, but you are legally defined as an older person subject to financial abuse if you're over the age of 60. The taking of the older person's property usually happens either through a relationship of trust, and we call that a fiduciary relationship, and you're going to hear that that phrase a few times today. So a fiduciary relationship can be a formal legal relationship where you have empowered someone to have responsibility for you, like someone you've named in a power of attorney or a trustee of a trust. But it can also be a more informal fiduciary relationship. Spouses can be fiduciaries of each other in certain situations, depending on the circumstances, parents and children. A caregiver may be a fiduciary. Your attorney is a fiduciary. Your financial advisor is a fiduciary. So this kind of exploitation is happening in these are trusted relationships, and it's taking advantage of a trusted relationship. Or the other kind of financial abuse is when you are targeted based on being older or being disabled. And that tends to be more the fraud and scam one-off. And I'm going to focus more on what happens in this relationship of trust. So when the property has been acquired through relationship of trust, it also has to be without consent, or, and this is an important or, through deception, intimidation, or undue influence. So most of the time, when exploitation is occurring, it is with consent. And I'm going to get a little bit more to that in a minute. In other words, you will often know that it is happening. The question is, and you may be consenting. And so that's where this deception, intimidation, or undue influence come in. These are ways of persuading you to agree to something that you might not otherwise have agreed to do. And that is why this is exploitative behavior. Now, that's kind of a legally definition. Let's speak English, please, Heather. What does this actually look like? So I'm going to run down with you the type of situations that are occurring every day in your community and mine that could be financial exploitation. It could be withdrawing money from bank accounts. This often looks like someone driving an older person to the bank and helping them make a withdrawal in cash and getting some of that cash. It's usually not the person having actual access to the bank, but being with the person while they get their money out. It can also look like adding your name to someone's bank account. And I am going to come back to that because I'm sure that some of you who are listening have done this. You've put your children or someone you trust as a joint owner on your account. But there are reasons not to do that, and I'm going to talk about those. But getting added to joint bank accounts is a major source of exploitation in some cases. It's getting an older person to sign checks willingly or forging their name. So this is happening when someone has access to you, often your home and your checkbook. You might have given them your checkbook because you need their help to help you write out and pay your bills. And so they're writing your bills for you and you are signing them, but they may be writing checks that they shouldn't be writing, and you're not able to understand that that's happening. Using a credit card without authorization or beyond the scope of authorization. So two separate things. Using a credit card without authorization is going to happen, again, when someone you know has access to you and your home and has been able to acquire your credit card, take it from you, use it, and most often bring it back. And you may not know that's happening, particularly if you're not paying close attention to your credit card statements. Using it beyond the scope of authorization happens all the time. You may, a homebound older adult who can't do their own shopping may have a very helpful neighbor, friend, caregiver who does their shopping for them. Walmart, grocery store, Target, wherever you need to run. You give them the credit card, they go do your shopping. But lots of times in those situations, we see cashback transactions happening where the person did your shopping and they also got $200, or maybe they bought themselves some things that weren't on your list. And if you weren't able to carefully look at your receipt, you didn't notice that. Transferring property, actually getting someone to sign a deed transferring real estate or make a gift or add you to a beneficiary on a financial account. Changing the estate plan. This is helping an older person go to an attorney, most often not the one that they have used in the past, and getting them to actually change their will or that in some way benefits the person who's taking advantage. Changing beneficiaries on financial accounts that transfer automatically at death. And a huge problem is someone getting your login credentials for your accounts. Don't give away your username and password, but it happens frequently. And on some self-managed financial accounts, you can just go in with a username and password and change these beneficiaries. That's a significant area of exploitation. Power of attorney abuse. This is someone who you have formally entrusted with control of your finances, but they are using your money for their benefit, not yours. And then billing for unnecessary work, selling inappropriate mortgage, investment, or insurance products, and coordinated frauds and scams. These last things I put in that bucket that is a little bit more stranger fraud, less likely to be people you know, although contractors working on homes and convincing older adults that they need repairs they don't need does happen, and it's good to have someone you trust involved with those kinds of projects. All right, so how does this happen? Now, my apologies to any neuroscientists who may be in the room watching this. Brain research is not really what I know, but I've read a lot about it because I am really fascinated, confused, puzzled, and concerned about the fact that our brain changes at the end, toward the end of our life in our later years, actually sooner than you would think. It actually starts at age 50. So I'm 52. I don't consider that to be my later years. It's all a matter of perspective. What we know is that a lot of the exploitation is not happening with people who are formally diagnosed with dementia, which may be what you think. We know that when people get a dementia diagnosis, they are often at a point where they can't protect themselves financially. But also when they get a dementia diagnosis, there's usually someone in their life who is aware that they are now vulnerable and is stepping up to take protective action. What I call the cognitive danger zone is actually before that. You may never get a dementia diagnosis. But you are in a time in your life when your ability to protect yourself is diminishing, and that happens to all of us. What we know is that beginning at age 50, there's a decline in what's called fluid intelligence. This is really problem solving, being able to see a new situation and navigate yourself through it without the benefit of any knowledge about it. The best example I could give about this is like how my children, my 22-year-old child can download a new app and immediately know how to use it. And if I download a new app, I'm sitting there going, are there instructions? Is there a manual? I need someone to show me how. And that's because I'm over age of 50 and my problem solving is in new situations is not as sharp as younger people. But the good news for those of us over the age of 50 is that we also have crystallized intelligence, which we also call wisdom. That's learned experience, life experience. Your wisdom continues to increase all the way until about age 70. So between 50 and 70, while your problem solving abilities are beginning to decrease, your wisdom is still increasing. And this kind of has a net effect of we're still sort of functioning with all the marbles, is how I like to say it to clients. Do you have all your marbles? Have you lost a couple of your marbles? How many marbles do you have left? It's really after age 70 where our wisdom begins to plateau and our problem solving continues to decrease. And what that looks like is we're not able to protect ourselves as well. Loss of healthy skepticism is the best way to describe it. So that when you were younger, if someone brought you a check from your checkbook and said, you need to pay $10,000 in property taxes, I've written the check for you, sign here. When you were younger, you would say, well, hold on, I need to see the bill. My taxes were never $10,000 before. How could they possibly be that now? When you get into that cognitive danger zone and you lose your healthy skepticism, and the person who brings you that check is someone that you know or trust, you're probably going to sign it. You're not going to question it. You're not going to be skeptical in the way that you used to be. And that will be happening to you before anyone in your family will be worried about your cognitive abilities, because you probably still get up every day, get dressed, exercise, do the things that you've always done. So that is the cognitive danger zone that I want everyone over the age of 70 to be aware exists, because you are potentially at risk. A quick note on why this is happening to older people. It's wealth concentration. Our country in the last 25, 30 years has shifted from a pension-based retirement. There was a time in this country where people didn't save huge nest eggs for their retirement because they worked for a company for 45 years and they retired with a pension that paid them a monthly check until they died. Now we see much more of people who have accumulated a wealth nest egg and they are trying to live off the income or something close to it at the end of their life. So there is just a lot of money in possession of older people in this country. And the segment, the age segment, 85 and older in this country, is the fastest growing population segment. We are living a long time. So there are a lot of older people who have a lot of wealth. And many people in this age bracket are lonely. And so when someone comes to you and shows interest in you and wants to spend time with you, most of the time you welcome that contact because you don't have as much as you did when you were younger, and that creates your vulnerability to be taken advantage of. There also is a lack of self-sufficiency problem. You can't do your shopping, you can't cook your own meals anymore. You're relying on someone else to do that. You are vulnerable and in a trusting relationship with those people. Which is why that the majority of this type of exploitation is at the hands of family members are the number one. Often children, also nieces, nephews, grandchildren, siblings. The second is fiduciaries, people who are in a formal trusted relationship with you who are taking advantage of that trust. Paid caregivers, friends, contractors, and scammers. And I've put this little cartoon up here that represent the siblings in many cases that I wind up in with litigation, but it's the four siblings together saying, we need a plan for mom's care. One of us does all the work, one of us goes AWOL, one undercuts our decisions, and one steals her stuff. It's funny, not funny. It does happen, and I will say there is often one sibling who steps up to do all the work. Very often that is the person who winds up being accused of financial exploitation. When that is happening in your family, and I'm going to talk a lot about transparency and open communication in the second half, but I think that when you've got a disproportionate sharing of responsibility in a family for older adults, you need to be having a lot of conversations about how that person may be compensated, because sometimes the reason the exploitation happens is because that one child feels entitled. And there are better ways to compensate without that are more transparent. Complicating factors. Well, we all have a right to make bad decisions. And this is a huge complication when evaluating potential cases of exploitation. Because usually what you've seen is at the end of someone's life, spending, gifting habits that are not normal for them, not in accordance with how they have always treated their money. It might have been someone who was always very frugal, who makes extravagant gifts. And it might be someone who always believed in treating all of their children equally, who is making extravagant gifts to only one child. Or maybe they're making extravagant gifts to a caregiver or a friend. How do we know if that's just their decision? And it may not be responsible to take half of your funds and give it away to someone that you don't know. But if you are not being influenced or deceived or intimidated, and if you do have your full mental faculties, you can make a bad decision for yourself, and other people shouldn't take it away. And your children, who may feel entitled to your money when you're gone, are not entitled to it. So we have to tease out the right to make bad decisions. There is also a huge complication around confusion. Oftentimes we find older adults who are in that cognitive danger zone are not always sure what they've done, particularly if they're having some short-term memory loss. They may be very confused about why they did what they did. And there is a dynamic of protection of, I use the word perpetrator, but frankly, if the perpetrator is your granddaughter who's living in your home and has fallen on hard times and just needs some money, you love that person. If what they've done is a crime, you don't want your granddaughter to go to jail. So there is a huge dynamic around older adults who are being exploited, actually keeping it a secret, potentially being embarrassed, but also wanting to protect family members who have done this to them. So when we go to try to unwind these situations, we're really looking for ways to protect the older person without having too much of an adverse impact on someone that they love in many cases. It all comes down to consent. Was the money that was taken or given away with consent? And on that, we have to look at consent alter ego. Consent is the notion that I have the ability to understand what I'm doing, and I made this choice of my own free will without anyone suggesting or deceiving or influencing me to do so. But the other side of consent is, well, do I have the ability to understand what I'm doing? And my concern is that many people in the cognitive danger zone don't have that full ability. We call this lack of mental capacity. So if you have made a gift, but you did it with consent, but you lack the mental capacity to be able to understand the size of this gift, perhaps in relation to your total asset portfolio, the size of this gift in relation to what you need to care for yourself for the rest of your life, then the gift may not be valid because you might not have had the mental capacity to make that gift. Undue influence is a wide sweeping category of situations where the individual probably had the mental capacity. In other words, they understood what they were doing and they understood how the gift or transaction related to what they owned and who they loved and who they would want to benefit. But undue influence happens when you are so under the influence of another person that the decision that you made voluntarily is really more their decision than yours. Determining if something was undue influence or not is usually happening way after the fact, way after the person has died or are no longer mentally competent at all. It is often what we are bringing to a jury in a full civil case and asking the jury to decide, was this consent or was it undue influence? But the best example I could kind of give you about undue influence would be someone who had always had an intent in their estate plan to equally benefit all of their children. But for the last 4 years of their life, one of their children has been living with them as a full-time caregiver, meeting all of their needs. And the one who lived with them does not get along with one of the other siblings. And any of you who have children out there will know exactly what I'm talking about when I say that as parents, we see our children in one way and we feel about them in one way. The way they see each other and feel about each other may be different than how we see and feel about them. And when one child has a lot more access to you when you are vulnerable and has issues with another child, we're going to very often see that other child get cut out of an estate plan. And that's when you've got to ask about undue influence. Did mom really make that decision to change? Or had she listened to one child in her ear for so long that she came to think that her daughter's will was her will? So that's really what that looks like. And it's very complicated to tease out and separate from the notion of consent. So that's the time I'm going to spend framing this issue for you and hopefully getting you a little concerned about it, so that you will be motivated to think through some preventive steps for yourself. So first, what should you do? And the hint over the entire rest of this, the theme that I would like you to walk away with is transparency is a virtue. I'm going to start there. I'm going to end there, because transparency is hard. And I would be willing to bet that a lot of you out there have never shared with your children, your siblings, your grandchildren, anyone outside of yourself and perhaps your spouse, exactly what your assets are. What is your income? How much do you have? What is your budget? How much do you spend? How much can you spend? What is your trajectory for making your money last for the rest of your life? People don't share that information in our society. We keep it close. There are reasons for that. But at the end of the day, if you want protection from your own changing cognitive capacity and to set yourself up to have layers of protection so that you can't be taken advantage of, the very best thing that you can do is to share your financial information and your plans, your estate plans and your life desires about how your money should be spent. You need to share it, and you need to be very strategic about who you share it with, and set up probably a network of more than one person that is going to share that information, that they're going to work together to protect you. That's what I call your circle of trust. And then within your circle of trust, you're going to have checks and balances. Let's begin with your financial institution. This is absolutely Beacon Pointe. Your financial advisors are probably your best friend in this process. It also can be your regular bank, particularly if you're the kind of person like to go into your local branch to do banking. You may get to know your tellers, they may know you. It is people, professionals, who know what is normal for you in terms of your money habits, and can through the relationship what they develop with you, they know who you want to benefit when you're gone. They know what your needs are now, and they know generally what your philosophy is about giving gifts or other assets during your lifetime. So they know you best. The list, I'm going to sort of jump around on my list here. The list of trusted persons is really important. You should talk to your financial advisor about creating this list with them. The list of trusted persons is a list of people that you give them permission to call if they think something is not right with you and the management of your assets. Anything that is out of the norm for you, unusual withdrawals, becoming more isolated, a new person in your life that they may be concerned about, you give them the permission to make a call, because they are in a fiduciary relationship with you and your information is private. And if they don't have your permission to share, they can't. So you can work with your, I hope that the one thing you'll all write down on the paper today, if nothing else, is to take some time to meet with your financial advisor and talk through your trusted persons and talk through how and when you would want them to make that call for you to bring someone in who can help if something is happening to you. Most financial institutions do have reporting duties, either to law enforcement or to adult protective services. I'll talk more about that in a minute. They have some ability to refuse to honor a power of attorney in certain situations, although the laws are different in every state and they do have to be thoughtful about refusing that document. One thing to know, though, is that they cannot refuse you. Banks, and if you ask for a withdrawal or a transfer, they don't have a lot of leeway to say no to you. That's really back to that trusted persons list, where that becomes really important, is their ability to notify someone else that we may need to do something. Your second best friend is me, your lawyer, or many other people like me out there who work in this field. Many of them consider themselves elder law attorneys. Estate planning attorneys also do all of this work. A great website is to look at the NAELA, N-A-E-L-A, which is the National Academy of Elder Law Attorneys. They have, you can search in your state and community to find someone close to you who works in this area, and you're looking for a lawyer who really spends the time like I spend thinking about older adult exploitation as a significant part of every day. Those are the people who can help you. And what are they going to help you with? You need to have a power of attorney. There's two kinds. You've probably heard of a healthcare power of attorney. That's naming someone who can make healthcare decisions for you if you become unable to make them for yourselves. Want to have that document, but the more important document is a financial legal power of attorney. It's also called a general power of attorney. It's also called a durable power of attorney. Every state's laws are a little different, but in general, what it does is allow you to name a person or people who can serve as your agents to transact your financial and legal business for you, and you can decide when that happens. Sometimes you can determine that they can't do it until you're unable to do so. Sometimes you might want them to be able to assist you even though you could. It's just easier for you if someone else is managing your finances. Do not, please, pull a foreign power of attorney off the internet. There are many of them, but not all power of attorneys are created equal. And when we're talking about protecting older adults, we want powers of attorney that have built-in safeguards. For example, safeguards that I use that you will not find on the internet. If I am giving one of your children the power over your finances, not even children, actually, I do this with kids. If one of them is getting the power to be your agent, I'm going to require them to give regular accountings and updates to the other children who do not have power over your finances. That's the transparency I'm talking about. If we're not using children, if you have a third party, friend, whoever is your agent, make them do accountings. Gifting is really important to talk about in powers of attorney. Do you want your agent to be able to make gifts of your money? Some people say no, and that needs to be written in the form power of attorney, and the one you pull off the internet may not be careful enough in this regard. But for some people, there are real important, valid reasons to let your agent give gifts for you. If we're going to allow gifting, then we need to really write in some safeguards around that. For example, limiting the amount of gifting, or if one child is getting a gift, should every child get an equal gift? Can your spouse transfer all of your assets into their own name? This is an important thing to ask yourself, particularly if you're in a second marriage and have children who are not the child of that spouse. So this is a reason to have a real serious conversation with an attorney about your power, having a power of attorney. And don't just name your older child as your agent. Give a lot of thought as to who. There are professionals who can serve as agent under power of attorney, and depending on your situation, that might be the better protective choice for you. Trust planning is also a good way to do this. And I'm not going to spend a lot of time on trust. Your attorney can help you with that, but it gets you the benefit, similar to a power of attorney, of being able to change who has control of your assets while remaining the beneficiary of your assets. Considering co-agents, two people to work together, that's good for transparency. Considering paid fiduciaries. I will say a HIPAA authorization, if you're familiar with HIPAA, that's the health information. Oh, of course, right now I'm having a senior moment. Anyway, it's that statute that every time you go to a doctor, they make you sign a waiver about who they're allowed to give your private health information to. I always have clients sign a HIPAA waiver that allows me or someone else to be able to get their health information for the purpose of being able to assess their mental capacity, because I might need to know that in order to help your plan that you've set up protect you. All right, so let's talk about self-help. Beyond your financial advisor and your lawyer, here are things that you can do. We've already talked about this. Well, first of all, the big hint, transparency is a virtue. Make a plan and then communicate your plan and involve others in your plan. That begins with your list of trusted persons with your financial advisor. That also, I always recommend that clients have family or team meetings. Whoever are the people that are going to be available to take over management of money for you or to help protect you, you need to share with them what you have. You need to share with them what your aging plan is and how your assets are needed to support you in your aging plan. And you need to share them what your intentions are when you're gone for who should inherit. And and then you need to share who's in charge of doing what as you are losing mental capacity to do so for yourself. One thing I always recommend is to share bank and credit card statements. And by that, I mean, give someone in your circle of trust the ability to see. That doesn't mean giving them the ability to transact on your bank. This is a good thing to do in the period of time before you're ready to let someone take over financial management for you. But it is just allow people to watch. People who are watching will see that every month you have this much income come in, and every month you spend about this on groceries, and once a year you pull out this much amount of money to make some end of year gift. Someone who's watching your statements will come to know what's normal for you, so they'll be in the best position to immediately be able to see when something happens that's not normal and talk to you about it. Talked about requiring accounting. That's telling one person who you've given control of your finances that they need to keep other people informed of what they're doing and show their transactions. That's an important thing to do when you get to the point where you don't have the mental ability to be able to check them. You want someone else to check them. Freeze your credit. I told you to write down that your takeaway from today is to talk to your financial advisor about your trusted persons list. The other thing I want you to take away from today is to freeze your credit. There are 3 national credit agencies. I sent to Beacon Pointe the link where you can do this, and I think they'll send it out after the presentation. But you want to go with a username and password. You can lock that up. I've got mine locked up, and as a result, I wasn't able to get a Talbot's credit card to get 10% the last time I shopped because I didn't remember to unfreeze my credit before I tried to apply for the Talbot's credit card. However, what a good thing to know that no one else can take out a credit card in my name using my personal information. Because when you get into the cognitive danger zone, people are going to have your personal information. You don't want them to be able to transact on your credit. Beware of self-managed investments. Most of you, because you're affiliated with Beacon Pointe, are likely already working with an advisor. My concern about self-managed investments is that there's no one watching the ship for you. My bigger concern is that I have so many cases where a spouse, a child, a friend got the username and password and were able to log into a self-managed account and change the beneficiaries. That happens a surprising number of times. So that I like people to have a real person that they work with on financial management. And there it is. Don't share your login credentials ever. Use a power of attorney. A properly drafted power of attorney can do appropriate changes to your investment accounts when you need them. Don't give them your login credentials. They'll be able to get their own login credentials with their power of attorney. Think twice about joint ownership. And actually, I'll just go ahead and say, don't even do it. Putting someone else's name as a joint owner on your bank account is dangerous for you, easy for the person to steal from you, potentially exposes you to payment of judgments on them if they get into any legal trouble. Use a power of attorney and empower your fiduciaries. Let your people that you have empowered to help you, let them help you. Alrighty. Sometimes all of our best preventions and trusted persons and artfully crafted powers of attorney and creating circles of trust, sometimes it fails us. And so we get into the knockout round and we need to know, what do I do to stop this? Exploitation is ongoing and I need it to end quickly. Here are what I consider the self-help interventions. These are most often not going to be things that the person who's being exploited is going to do, because most often the person who's in the exploitation relationship is not aware, or they're consenting, there's undue influence. They're usually not willing or able to self-help. But who can self-help? Well, if you have power of attorney for them, or you're in a trusted relationship, or you are a family member or a neighbor or a friend, there are things you can do. If you have power of attorney, and I'll say that a lot of these situations are what I call self-financial neglect, repeatedly going to the bank and pulling out money to give to someone they shouldn't be giving it to. And when they go to the bank and ask for a withdrawal, the bank contractually cannot say no to them. So how do you stop them from doing that? If you can't stop them from driving to the bank, and you can't prevent the bank from giving them their own money? Well, one thing that we have tried is, if you are the power of attorney, you can close their account and move their money somewhere else. The success of that varies on the particular situation and personalities involved, but it might be appropriate to try in certain situations. If it's a phone or scam email or cell phone situation, get a new phone, get a new email address, consider whether you should even be online anymore, or whether someone should do that for you. I talked to you about freezing credit. Other people can do that for you, and it's called the protected consumer credit freeze. And I won't get too deep in the weeds on that, but when you look on the websites of the credit agencies, you can find out how a third person in limited situations can freeze someone else's credit. Change or add caregivers. If it's caregiver exploitation, then have two people there at once, or have a different rotation, or get rid of the one person, create some checks and balances, and always be noisy and avoid isolation. An older person who is living alone, if you can check on them, create a rotation of neighbors or church members, or people who will stop by at regular intervals and come to know what's normal for that person. All right, if self-help doesn't work, there are judicial remedies available. You can, and these vary by state to state, so I'm generalizing, but in many places you can go to court and ask a trustee or a power of attorney to give a formal accounting to the court, to be reviewed by the court, to make sure that all is well with the finances. There are also grounds for removing trustees and power of attorney when those are the people who are abusing the relationship. When the person is engaging in self-financial neglect, meaning they won't stop giving their money away appropriately, you may need to consider, we call it guardianship in North Carolina. I know in California it's called conservatorship, but it is a court-ordered process of putting someone else in charge of the money and actually taking away that person's right to transact their own money. You've seen a lot of bad press in the news about these conservatorships. They can be abused, but getting good legal advice, sometimes this is the only way, and getting good legal advice is a choice. You also can go to court and get money damages when money has been taken, and sometimes you can revoke documents. All right, I'm coming up on the end of my, I'm gonna speed through the rest of this because I've given you the meat of most of what I want to talk about, and I'm coming up on the Q&A time. Takes a village to stop elder financial abuse. This is that village. It includes law enforcement. You can report to law enforcement. They will investigate. In most states, it's a crime. It's also a federal crime. There are pros and cons to that, but the biggest advantage is that it doesn't cost you anything. The biggest disadvantage is that you have no control over the process after you make the report. Departments of Social Services, Adult Protective Services in most states are very alert to this. The Elder Justice Leadership Team that I serve on here in North Carolina is led by our Adult Protective Services staff with partnership from the DA's office, civil attorneys, social workers, and law enforcement. And so that's a whole sphere of people in most communities that are working together. Do not hesitate to report this to Adult Protective Services. They will investigate. It will be confidential and they won't tell you what they found. That's the downside, which is where attorneys where you can afford to have a private attorney involved, give you more control and an ability to peek behind the curtain of what is happening. And most civil attorneys are able to do judicial and non-judicial interventions in cases of exploitation. Financial institutions, we've talked about the powers that they have. I will say that for lower income individuals, most of whom often their assets are Social Security income and a home, and that's all they have. And family members move in and use their Social Security check to buy things that are not appropriate for the adult. Sometimes it's drugs, and the older person isn't getting their money because their Social Security is being spent on drugs. You can go to the Social Security office and they will appoint a responsible third party to receive that money, so the older person doesn't get their Social Security anymore. A lot of people don't know that's available, but a lower income person who's being taken advantage of, that's a really good tool. I want you to know about long-term care ombudsmen. It's an awkward word, but for people who live in nursing homes, there is appointed an ombudsman whose sole job it is to advocate for the rights of people in nursing homes. So if someone in a nursing home is being taken advantage of financially, contact the ombudsman and that person can help you. Attorneys general, banking regulators, healthcare providers, family members, concerned citizens, and the older adults themselves. That's the village that needs to be working together to solve this problem. I'm going to skip these law enforcement slides that we talked about. And here is where I will conclude and open for questions. Please believe that this can happen to you. Please believe that this could happen to you before anyone diagnoses you with any cognitive deficiency. Older adults are vulnerable just by virtue of being older in our society, I'm sorry to say. So if it's you, have a plan and communicate your plan. And if you are concerned about this issue for loved ones, ask them what their plan is, and perhaps get involved with a circle of trusting people to support that adult into creating a protective plan for themselves.
Thank you.
Right.
Thank you,
some
Heather.
Questions.
Yes, I've got some questions that came in. Is it possible to set a maximum limit on outgoing funds on bank and brokerage accounts?
Well, I might actually turn that one back to you, Jacqui, because I don't, I'm not the financial advisor. I would say yes, and I have done that on some of my accounts where we have a set amount that can go out every month, and in order to get more, I have to work through my advisor. But what do you say about that, Jacqui?
That's a good question, and I will look into it. I have not run across that, but it's a good. It's like an executive director at a nonprofit. They can only spend so much without having to run it through the finance committee. So
I think what you could do, and this is why that advisor relationship is important, is you could say to your advisor, I'm never going to withdraw more than $5,000 at a time. And if you ever see that happen in my account, I want you to call my trusted person.
Yeah.
So that'd be like really objective criteria that if that gets flagged, then they can help you. Someone else can look into it.
We do that. We not that, but we see withdrawals that are coming out of accounts, and sometimes we do catch something that was very uncharacteristic of that client and have been able to find some things, but I don't know whether you can like lock it in, but I'll find out about that. What do you do when a spouse who is over 80 is making decisions financially and medically that are not in the interest of the spouse who has dementia, and one of the children is supporting these decisions against the rest of the family? It's this whole family.
Yeah, that is so I have that situation a lot. An older couple aging together. There's lots of issues, psychological ones in there about not wanting to give up the right to take care of each other. But the fact is, if the caregiver is themselves in a cognitive danger zone, you have risk for both. Sometimes we do look at guardianship in those situations, and we think about putting, if there's multiple sets of children who don't agree, I often look for a professional guardian to do that, someone who's not caught up in the family dynamics and can think objectively. Sometimes we can do family agreements if it's a less contentious situation, and you need to approach those delicately. But that is, an elder law attorney works in that sphere of that question, and that's where I would go for help.
And it's pretty common when,
Very.
yeah, yeah.
And, you know, the caregiving spouse will not like it that kids are, the fact is, none of us like it when kids or other trusted people come in and try to take away our self-actualization, our rights of self-control. That has to happen in order to safely navigate the aging process for most people. And my great grandmother used to say the secret to getting older was being able to gracefully give things up. And I think about that a lot with older folks in these situations, is how to help them gracefully give things up. If you can view your own aging in that way to be ready to do that, I think it'll be less painful for everybody.
Yeah. So a lot of pre-conversations, right, with the family before you get into those situations altogether. What if it's a company that cons an elder into a loan and now is liable for it? This reminds me of the banking stuff, Wells Fargo, whoever it was that happened to one of our clients. She went in and ended up with a credit line, a new credit card, a line of credit, all this stuff. And in that case, I went down there with her and you said, you need to unwind all this, but I don't know if that should be recorded.
Yes. So legally for me, undoing legal documents in most states is a process of filing a lawsuit and claiming that those documents were executed at the time that the person who signed them either lacked the capacity or was unduly influenced. Those are two very common grounds where you can set aside a legal document. So you've got to be able to prove the capacity or the undue influence. And that's, I could do a whole other hour-long talk on that. But that's your ultimate recourse, is you'd have to sue. But before you get there, you want to be writing letters to the bank, explaining the capacity and influence issues and asking them to just fix it, because some of these financial institutions can, if they're not predatory, may work with you to try to work out of a situation that shouldn't have happened.
Right. And that's what happened in this case. They changed things pretty quick. I've got a bunch of requests for, I forgot to say this at the beginning, I've got a bunch of requests for whether people will have access to the slides. I don't know how you feel about that, Heather, but this is being recorded. So this recording will be able to be accessed and sent on to friends. So you would have copies of the slides in that recording. I have POA and I'm managing an older relative's finances because she has dementia and can't do it anymore, even though she thinks she can. However, sometimes she accuses me of stealing or withdrawing money, but I'm doing everything for her for free, sometimes at my own expense. Additionally, there are some bad actors in the family who actually would steal from her if they could. She tends to like them more socially because they are more fun and I'm the boring, responsible one. I'm worried that I'm going to be accused of in a more formal way by these people to a point, and they will exploit her, leaving her without any money. How do I protect myself?
So transparency is also a virtue for the person who is serving as the agent, who has control. I would say you want to keep records of everything you spend, keep all the bank statements, keep all the checks you write, try to avoid transferring money by wire transfer where it's not clear where the money went. Absolutely avoid ever transferring any money into any of your own personal account. You would like to be able to roll out, if ever pressed, here are her legitimate expenses, and here is the paper trail of the money that I spent for her, and everything is in order. And be willing to show that unless there's some legitimate reason not to, that I can't readily think of. So I just think it's record keeping and understanding. Don't add yourself as a joint owner to any account. You can get on almost every account as the power of attorney, which gives you the ability to see and write checks, but you don't own the account. And that's kind of a common mistake that people make when they're helping older people with their money.
This question might be like what you said could be a session unto itself, but should elderly parents put their property, home, etc., in a son or daughter's name if they do not have long-term care insurance for medical care?
Yeah. Okay. So you're asking a question about whether someone might need to qualify for Medicaid to pay for skilled nursing care at the end of life.
I think that's where they're going. Yeah.
Right. There are some times when you should do that. But that is definitely a consult with an attorney who does Medicaid planning because a lot of people do that inappropriately and it causes litigation after the person is gone. So that's got to be done in the scope of a broader plan about how to pay for nursing care.
Okay. But Heather, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the presentation. I got good feedback in our chat and it seemed to work good. So I'm sure I'll see you soon.
Look forward to it, Jacqui. Thank you, everyone who joined. I'm happy to be a part of it. Have a great day.
Thanks.